in modern media, mis and disinformation is easier to push out and easier to trick people into believing.
Hello, I'm Colin.
And I'm Charlie.
And welcome to the C&C Talks podcast, episode 26 of season 3. And Charlie, it's good to have you back.
Yeah, it is good to be back. Just a reminder, we release episodes every week and we talk about politics, world events, and sports. It's currently Monday, October 7th, 2024 at about 9 p.m. Pacific time. And we do have a lot to get into. I believe we're discussing the one-year anniversary of October 7th. I will join back up later for the rest of the regularly scheduled programming.
Yep, we are. You're going to have to wait just a little bit longer to hear from Charlie, because we're now joined by our producer, Zack, to discuss what took place now 1 year ago, as of when we're recording this, the October 7th attack by Hamas in Israel, and everything that has happened in that region since. Obviously, there is a lot that has happened in that region since, an amount that we are obviously not going to be able to get to everything, but we're going to do our best to talk about it the best we can in a hopefully short amount of time before we move on to the rest of the show. So, Zack, I guess probably the appropriate place to start is with what actually happened a year ago, the actual events of that day when we saw Hamas go into Israel with their attacks. Obviously taking hundreds of hostages, I believe about 100 still believed to be in captivity in Gaza. So what are your thoughts on all of this now a year?
Well, I think it's a really solemn day. This was one of the biggest terrorist attacks we've had all around the world in quite a long time. On October on October 7th 1 year ago. And I think it's also it's also a sad day, not just because of what happened, but I think because of how the world has reacted to it. There's not a lot of there's really like the protests right now are mostly focused around the harm that's happened to Palestine, which definitely deserves its place to be protests, but at the same time, this is a day where Israel experienced, the biggest killing of Jews since the Holocaust, 1 year ago. And I think the world has kind of just turned a blind eye to that. And
glossed over it.
Yeah, and arbitrarily painted Israel as the bad guy. I'm not just talking about I'm talking about the people of Israel as well. Of course, Netanyahu, I would be perfectly fine with people calling him a bad guy. He is a bad guy, but you can't gloss over the fact that thousands of innocent Jewish people were killed on this day 1 year ago in brutal, awful ways.
Yes, I mean, some of the stories about it are just absolutely horrific, and I think you make a good point, because we'll talk about some of the protests in a little while, but I think that when we talk about this issue now, it's mostly in the context of this is what Israel is doing in Gaza, and it's wrong, and that definitely deserves a spotlight. But I think it's important to remember how this started, and I'm not pretending the entire started on October 7th day, right?
Yeah.
On for generations, but this particular iteration of it did start then, and it is important to remember that why did this start? It was not because of Israel doing something. It was because they were attacked. They had, again, like you said, hundreds, thousands maybe of their civilians killed. Innocent civilians just killed by Hamas. Which
Yeah.
is, and it's important to keep reiterating this too. Hamas is a terrorist organization. We talk
Yeah.
about a genocide. Hamas's stated goal is essentially a genocide of Jews in Israel. That's their stated goal. And so,
Yeah.
before we paint them as some sort of heroes, let's remember that that's what they want. And the only reason that you would support what they do over instead of what Israel does, the only reason is if you are anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. That's the only reason. Look, it is perfectly reasonable to support the Gazan people. My heart breaks for what's happening to the Gazan people. But
Mm.
they didn't choose Hamas, or at least they haven't for literally since the majority of them weren't alive.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Gaza has never really been a good place to live in. Even before this, there's been extreme poverty, extreme hunger, famine, all of that. And sure, you can blame a lot of that on Israel, but what has Hamas done to try to address the problems for those people?
Very little.
They haven't done anything.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't done anything. So to paint them as some sort of good guy when they've taken thousands of innocent lives is just unbelievably horrific, and not just Israeli lives of their own people too. They have blood on their hands for a lot of those people. And I feel like in the last year we've seen an embracing not just of them but of other uh of other Islamic terrorist groups for the most part. Not trying to blame this on the religion of Islam, but groups like Hezbollah. We've seen some rehabilitation of Osama bin Laden, and
Yeah.
these are terrorists, and we cannot lose sight of that and what they have done to countless innocent lives.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think what people need to really understand and really think about is the fact that and we've talked about this before, the citizens of each of these nations are Palestine and Israel are not synonymous with their governments.
Correct.
In pretty much every case, these are unpopular governments in their country.
Yeah.
By the majority of their people. Now, I think based on the war that's been raging, that's been changing a little bit. These sort of radical governments have been becoming a little more popular than they were, but the majority, I think, still, in either country, either nation, don't support their government. They don't support what's going on. It's really a war of governments right now, and
Yeah.
each of their governments are not really recognizing the loss and loss of life that they're causing, and really just not representing their people well and what they want. Neither side, I would say, wants a war, although, like I said before, that might be changing because of just how much bombing and combat that's already happened. People are starting to become scared, as they should be, and when that happens, more divisions come. But at the beginning of this, neither side wanted a war. Neither side supported their government. One side, Palestine, didn't even vote for their government. They didn't even get the chance to vote for their government, most of them, because they weren't alive, like you said. So it's a really sad cycle that keeps happening where maybe there's a bit of peace coming to that area, and that's not to gloss over the tensions that were already there. Israel Israel's treatment of Gaza is not acceptable, but you know, at least there wasn't like a raging war, I think.
Yeah.
And yeah, go ahead.
I mean, and when we talk about war too, like these sides are not on equal playing fields when it comes to war either. And
No.
the thing is, Hamas knows this. Like they know that Israel can crush them. If like physically, does Netanyahu have the political capital to do that? Is another question. I think he thinks he has more political capital than he maybe does at the moment.
Or
But
does
but I think I feel like sometimes we say things like that, and the response is like, well, you're not clearly articulating a side on this. We're the pro people side.
Yeah.
The people in both Israel and Palestine, for different reasons, are suffering from this.
Yeah.
Israel, because there was a massive terrorist attack, and Gaza's now
And they're being bombed,
constantly bombed. Like, this isn't a win for people. This is not a win for human rights on any level.
No.
So we have to keep that in mind. Now, I think it is important to talk about how in the last year Israel has responded to this, how what they have done, because I think it's very important to say this, and we said this back in last October, and I believe it. I think everybody here on the podcast would say the same thing. Israel should not have to deal with terrorist attacks like this from, and they have a right to try to make sure that they are safe from things like that. Every country should have that right. If you don't have that right, frankly, it's hard to call you a sovereign state.
Yeah.
And so they should have that right. We all believe that, and we all believe that Hamas should be eradicated because they are a terrorist group. Now, I get that sounds awfully close to the disastrous war on terror, right? I get that. But that brings me to the other point. And this is a point that has, I think, been beautifully articulated by Kamala Harris. How Israel defends itself matters.
Mm-hmm.
Just like how the U.S. went after Al-Qaeda after 9/11 mattered.
Yeah.
And they didn't do it well.
A lot of it was completely unjustified. Just as what Israel is doing right now is completely unjustified.
Yeah. So it's not just unjustified, it doesn't work. You end up in a forever war.
Yes. And maybe that's what they want, to be honest. Or
I mean, we can debate what the right term is to call what Israel is doing in Gaza.
Mm-hmm.
We can debate whether it's considered a genocide.
Mm-hmm.
We can debate all of those things. But to what extent does terminology matter when at the end of the day, what Israel is doing in Gaza is, at the very least, war crime. They are seemingly intentionally targeting civilians. And it didn't start out extremely brazen. It has become extremely brazen.
Yes. Yeah.
And it is completely unacceptable, Zach, what Israel's doing in Gaza right now.
Absolutely.
Again, they have a right to defend themselves. They have a right to go after Hamas, but that's not what they're doing.
It's not.
They're trying to make it seem like that's what they're doing, so that really they can use it as an excuse to do what Netanyahu to do for a long time, which is try to take over the Gaza Strip. And it's similar to what he's also trying to do in the West Bank, which is, again, not controlled by Hamas.
Yeah. Yeah,
So, No, go for it.
Yeah, and I think it's a really tricky situation. I wanted to go back to your point on the war on terror. Like it's a tricky topic because this gets into the whole idea of what is a country justified in doing if it's attacked, and that's not a straightforward thing. There are certain lines that are very clear that you shouldn't cross, and Israel has definitely crossed those. Killing civilians is, I would say, in pretty much every scenario, a red line that you don't cross.
Exactly.
And but at the same time, what the U.S. did, like you said, when Al-Qaeda attacked in the Middle East was completely unjustified as well. Although, it's difficult when you start thinking about what was the U.S. justified in doing after that attack? Like, how do you define that? I would say personally that we definitely were justified in doing something. I mean, it was the biggest terrorist attack on our country in since Pearl Harbor, and
Yep.
the biggest in our history. And so we were justified in doing something. It's difficult to define what that is, and so it's tricky. The whole thing is very, very tricky. But I think what we can take away is that what the U.S. did to handle Al-Qaeda was not okay. What Israel is doing now is not okay. And I think my personal stance on why what Israel is doing is not okay is because of the point that I said earlier, that Hamas is not synonymous with the people of Gaza. In fact, they're very separate. They're not aligned in many ways. And so, by killing innocent Gazans, you are killing people that aren't associated with the group that attacked you. And I think that's the root of the issue right there, is that I think countries should only be justified in going after the group that attacked them.
Yeah.
And that's not what Israel is doing. They're making life terrible for people in Gaza. They're killing them. They're, there's all these stories of bombings where there was one Hamas person in an area filled with civilians, and they decided to bomb the whole area instead of, maybe doing a more targeted attack. Like, that's completely not okay.
Yeah. Now, I think also the question then is, the U.S. gives Israel a lot of bombs, a lot of weapons, a lot of funding for the military. And I think a lot of Americans are reasonably unhappy that their money, their taxpayer money, is going towards bombs that end up killing the lives of innocent civilians. They're sending weapons to Israel that that were made here in America by American workers that are being used to intentionally kill civilians. And I think that is a very thing for Americans to be mad about, especially since Israel, getting all of this from the U.S., has seemingly not cared at all about what the U.S. has said about what they're doing, has not bothered to listen when the U.S. says, hey, this is not okay. And some of that you can blame on the U.S. for, continuing to, even after Israel crosses their red lines, them seemingly not caring about them as red lines and continuing to send them weapons. But at the end of the day, you're this is that's what our weapons are being used for, something that I feel like as Americans we shouldn't necessarily be okay. There's ways that Israel could do this, that could actually try to target Hamas, but that's not the point. That's, again, not what they're trying to do. And that kind of leads me into, you think about what we've seen a lot of in the last year, which is these pro-Palestinian protests here in the US, but then all over the world, really. We saw, especially here in the US, on college campuses, we've seen it be a huge thing. And I think that I think it's perfectly reasonable to protest what Israel's doing. I do.
Yeah.
I think that there's a couple things, though, that we're seeing. Number one, we're seeing this might come off as a little asinine, but we're seeing people care about this in a way too much, not that they have too much passion for it, but that compared to other things, like I'm not trying to say this isn't an important issue, but especially when it comes to the election. Like, if you're threatening to withhold your vote from Harris, who has spoken about Gaza in ways that even Biden hasn't, when talking about the and how Israel defends itself actually does matter. And then if you compare that to Trump, and then you're like, oh yeah, no, both are the same. No, they're just objectively not. And even if they are, okay, what about the issue of democracy? Are we just not caring about that now? Are we all just single issue Gaza voters now? And second of all, we see a lot, and I mean a lot, of just blatant anti-Semitism
Yeah.
at the Israelis. And we also see a lot of people that I think just don't understand, A, what the president can do about this and what they protest. And number two, don't seem to just understand basic laws. Like, yeah, you have a right to assemble. Okay, that doesn't mean that you have a right to go that doesn't mean that a school can't expel you for setting up a massive encampment on their campus and waving pro-Hitler flags.
Yeah.
So what do you make of this? Just fairly quickly.
I think that my main problem with the protests is not that they're protesting what Israel is doing. It's that they're doing, like you said, they're packaging it in this extremely anti-Semitic way.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're literally waving flags with swastikas on them, you can't claim to be against genocide. You just, that's like literally the universal symbol for genocide since 1938 or whatever. Like,
and by the way, also if you're chanting from the river to the sea, also pro-genocide.
But yeah, I think a lot of it just comes from a really just deep ignorance about the history of the region and the history of the relationship between Israel and Palestine and just foreign policy in general. I think that these people, a lot of them, I can't say this for the ones holding up swastikas, but for the ones who aren't doing that and are just concerned about what's happening in Gaza and are sort of just jumping on the train that is these protests. I think for them it's just that they're not sort of doing it maliciously. They're not, I wouldn't say they're doing,
absolutely,
they're being anti-Semitic maliciously. I think that they're
I think there's a lot of good faith people that care about what Israel is doing, think that what Israel is doing is wrong and are rightfully protesting it. I think that like what I said about the anti-Semitic stuff, which that has been taking place, but that in no way defines all protests.
No, and I think that a lot of it too is like, I think most educated people in America and most people in general have sort of realized that the war on terror was a bad thing. And this, from just a very surface level perspective, this sort of war that's happening in Israel and in the Middle East, it kind of looks like that. It kind of looks similar from very surface level. If without any history, it looks like, the powerful country, Israel, got attacked and is now just completely destroying, everything in the area for no reason. And, it looks very similar to the situation that happened in the US that a lot of Americans sort of reject right now, as they should. it's about time. But the truth of the matter is that it's not. It's way more complicated than that, and these conflicts go back way farther than the conflicts between U.S. and Al Qaeda, and they weren't. You can't argue that they were started by one party or another. In the case of the U.S., you can very much argue that the U.S. In a lot of ways brought 9/11 on itself by doing things in the Middle East that were completely not okay.
Yeah.
You can't say that for this situation. It's very much I would say the blame goes equally on either side. And so but from an outside perspective without any context about what's gone on in that region,
Yeah.
it looks similar, and I think that's why it's sort of spread in the US so quickly, this pro-Palestine movement, and they're so quick to dismiss Israel. A lot of people would say it's just the anti-Semitism that was already there that's causing them to sort of hate on Israel in a way that is unjustified. And I think that's true for some people. But I think the vast majority of people, it really just comes from an ignorance about what's going on.
Yeah. One final quick thing on this, and then we will get back to the regular programming here on the C&C Talks podcast with Charlie and myself. Where do we go from here? Because this doesn't seem to be ending. We've seen now Israel get into even more of their own making since this has happened. We've seen their ground invasion in Lebanon. We've seen their conflicts with Iran over the last few weeks. And then, like, where do we go from here? Because I mean, ideally, you want a ceasefire at some point. You want you want a return of the hostages and a two-state solution. But is that even practical? I mean, in theory, it's a great idea, but does that actually work in practice? And I'm not convinced, sadly, that the answer is yes. So what do you make of where this goes from here, Zach? Just real quick before we have to wrap.
Well, I think if it continues on the track that it's going, I think it's pretty clear that we're going to have just all-out war. I mean, we've seen now Iran attack Israel earlier some months ago, and then Israel retaliated, and then now Iran is attacking Israel again. This is a cycle that doesn't just end itself. It needs some sort of outside intervention to stop it from happening. And I think that outside intervention is maybe it's too late at this point, but we need to, like we sort of were talking about before, the US needs to stop letting Israel just completely ignore, international law and just ignore killing civilians. We have to really, I think we have to take a much harsher stance and say, you don't get these weapons if you use them to do this, period.
Exactly. I think that's hugely important.
Because right now they're just calling our bluff. Every time we say that, you can't, they're going to go, really? Watch me. You're not going to, stop giving me weapons. And we're not stopping giving them weapons.
Yeah, no, they've been proven right.
Yeah, we're just reinforcing the fact that we're flaking on our own values. And that needs to stop, I think. And that's a really big reason. We can't let Netanyahu keep escalating this infinitely. It won't end well.
Yeah. I agree. I think making sure that there is a red line to what they're willing to do, but also we talk about a potential ceasefire. So far, for the most part, it's been Hamas that's declined to participate in one of those. There have been ones agreed upon, but that tried to help broker, and it has gotten Israel's agreement. And Hamas has no interest in it. Hamas wants to keep fighting this war, it seems. And so, from that standpoint, I don't know where you go, because if you're Israel and you're just like, okay, yeah, ceasefire, no conditions, we're just going to pull out, right? Then,
Mhm.
hey, you've stranded all your hostages. And you cannot just give up on these people, right? These are,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how many of them are actually still alive, but these are important people. They matter. And
Yeah.
then also, what's going to stop it from happening again?
Yeah. Yeah.
From that standpoint, I don't know how you get out of it. All right, well, Zach, thanks for coming on and discussing this. We went a bit over time on this segment, but we'll now get back to the regularly scheduled program. All right, and Charlie, we now move on to something. We've already had one really big hurricane in the last couple of weeks, Hurricane Helene, hitting the Carolinas, Florida, Georgia, the whole southeastern region of the United States. We'll have more on that one in a sec, but now we have, Charlie, a second major hurricane, Hurricane Milton, on course to hit Florida. I think we're hearing like sometime around Wednesday or Thursday at this point.
Wednesday night into Thursday morning, and this is a big one.
Yeah, this one intensified in a way that shocked a lot of people. As of this recording, it is a Cat 5 hurricane, so really bad. If you don't know anything about hurricanes, Cat 5 is the worst of them. For some context on how bad this is per Noah Berggren, a meteorologist at Fox 35 in Orlando, who says that um, there are the intensity is 897 millibars of pressure. Now, if like me before today, you didn't know exactly how to quantify millibars, lower means a more intense storm. Hurricane Maria, for some context, was 908 millibars. This is now, as of this recording, 11 millibars lower than that. So if you remember Hurricane Maria, that is bad. The record is 882 millibars. So Milton is getting close to the record. I believe it's now the fourth strongest hurricane ever recorded by pressure on this side of the world. This again from Noah Berggren, of meteorologist of Fox 35 Orlando, who also says this hurricane is nearing the mathematical limit of what Earth's atmosphere over this ocean water can produce. Charlie, it's never a good sign when you hear nearing the mathematical limit of what Earth's atmosphere can produce.
Yes, in general, if you are reaching the mathematical limit of a basically destructive spinning cloud ball that's going to deal significant damage to much of one of the states in the United States, that is generally not good.
No, it is not good at all. And the mayor of Tampa Bay, which by the way is expected to have roughly, I believe, like 10 feet of above ground flooding
Yeah,
from this
Tampa and
storm.
St. Petersburg are going to take the brunt of this as it comes
Exactly.
into Florida.
The mayor, Jane Castor of Tampa, has said that said on CNN Monday night, and I quote, "I can say this without any dramatization whatsoever. If you choose to stay in one of those evacuation areas, you are going to die," end quote. So in other words, Charlie, if you are on the Florida Gulf Coast, evacuate.
Yes,
This is
absolutely.
a very serious storm. This is again one of the biggest hurricanes we have ever seen. Will it weaken somewhat before it makes landfall? Possible, I mean, even probable, but this is still just going to cause massive destruction. Winds right now are something like 180 miles an hour, Charlie.
Yeah, and they have the potential as it comes in to even grow a bit more than that.
Yeah, I mean, our thoughts are just with everybody in Florida, everybody who's going to have their lives uprooted due to this, everybody that might potentially die due to this, as well as everybody still recovering from Hurricane Helene. And speaking of Hurricane Helene, Charlie, there's been a lot of misinformation regarding this hurricane going around that I think, I mean, there's always misinformation on the internet, but I think this misinformation is particularly notable, what we're seeing, because we're just seeing from the far right just straight up lies about the federal government's response, and lies that are dangerous to the people they're who are trying to recover from this, who are trying to get aid, lies about, again, what Biden has done, what FEMA is doing. And every local official, most of whom are Republicans, right? Like these states, not North Carolina, but Georgia, Florida, Tennessee, South
South
Carolina.
Dakota. Oh, sorry, South
What?
Carolina, not South Dakota.
Yeah,
South
South
Carolina.
Carolina.
I got messed up the
Yeah.
South states.
Yeah, they all have Republican leaders in those states. All of them are like pushing back on this, saying, no, actually, the federal government's response has been great for the most part. And it's still not stopping any of these rumors, which have also been pushed by the owner of Twitter, Elon Musk. More on him a bit later in the show. Charlie, this is dangerous stuff.
Absolutely, and people need to take these warnings seriously.
Yeah, I mean, look, just misinformation in general about storms. I mean, really, just misinformation in general is bad. About potentially deadly storms is really, really damaging. Like, this is the type of stuff that can actually cost people lives. But also the way that we're seeing this type of misinformation produced, I think is notable because I've seen a lot of interesting comments about this recently about like, this is what it's going to be like in the post-election period, especially if Harris ends up winning. Especially the way that they're going to be able to use social media, specifically X or Twitter or whatever, to spread it. It's a lot harder to find reliable information. It's much easier to pose as a reliable source on the platform now, even if you're not. It's a lot easier to gain traction, especially since the owner of the platform is platforming this misinformation. And you think it's bad when he's platforming misinformation about a hurricane. Wait till it's about the election, Charlie.
Yeah, and I think that just really highlights the fact that in modern media, mis and disinformation is easier to push out and easier to trick people into believing.
Exactly. No, we have a misinformation crisis. Moving on from hurricanes, Charlie, we did do a live stream on this last week, but let's quickly just recap the vice presidential debate, especially now looking back on it, now that we have the benefit of hindsight and we're not like instantly reacting to it. What are kind of your takeaways? Any moments that stuck out from you? Any reactions to the debate that might have stuck out to you, or how it may be affecting the political landscape?
Yeah, as I said before, my internet decided that it didn't want me on the live stream. I think both candidates came into it with different goals. I think really for Walz, he just needed to keep his position and really explain where he stands. And for Vance, he really needed to get his reputation off the bottom of the charts. And I think they both succeeded in that goal. I think both candidates came out of the debate better than they came in.
Yeah, I would agree with that sentiment. I mean, we've seen it in polls, again, take them for what they're worth, but we've seen both candidates' approval ratings rise, both vice presidential candidates, that is. I don't think that the vice presidential debate is going to have really much of any impact on the election. I think that in real time, it might have looked like Vance did better, at least if you didn't already know the facts that he lied his way through, because he told some very, very tall tales. But I think a moment, like probably the most viral moment from that debate, is the Tim, I'm focused on the future comment from Vance about about who won the 2020 election, with Walz then responding, like that's a damning non-answer. And it is a damning non-answer. And so I think that, I mean, this is not something we normally see. We normally see Republicans win the social media messaging after debates because they get more clippable sound bites. They're very good at that. I don't think Vance had any particularly good ones for him. I thought Walz did, but again, I just don't think a vice presidential debate matters.
Yeah, I think really probably most people's minds were already made up by the time this debate happened. So I don't know how effective this would be to really change anyone's mind, but we'll see.
I think
It does
it's
open
more
up.
than just that. Like, I think if there are still undecided voters, are they really watching the vice presidential debate?
Oh, no, not at all. And I think the bigger question is, if there's undecided voters at this point in the race, are they going to even vote?
Yeah, I mean, I think as people that are pretty reliably informed, we sometimes fall into a trap of being like, how is it possible that there's any undecided voters whatsoever? But I think that those people actually do somehow exist. I'm not entirely sure what it is that's going to make them make up their minds, but I think that there are people that are worth appealing to in this way. But the vice presidential debate, no, I guarantee you none of them were watching it. A presidential debate, maybe, but the vice presidential debate, no. Moving on, Charlie, there's been a bit of a debate in the Democratic Party going on about who to kind of prioritize, I guess, in terms of endorsements, like which coalition should we try to appeal to more? The conservatives who like the Never Trump conservatives who are kind of like seeing the way that Trump is pushing the Republican Party and don't want that and might be willing to vote for Kamala Harris to get Trump out, or kind of the progressives who they're not going to vote for Trump, but maybe they'll vote for Jill Stein, or maybe they just won't vote because they're unhappy with Harris on Gaza policy or whatever. And
well, I think in that regard, if you're asking me which one I think they should go for, I think at this point it's going to be very hard for them to get either. I think the issue is the Never Trump Republicans have issues with Harris on an example of they don't really know exactly what her policy is. I heard that claim's been made multiple times of, well, we don't know exactly what she's going to do, so maybe I just won't vote. And as for the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, at this point, I think that is very likely just not repairable.
Yeah, I mean, I think on that last point, it's definitely the case. I think the first point, I mean, we do hear a lot, especially from the media, but we do hear from some of these, like people that are kind of, they won't vote for Trump, but they're kind of on the fence about Harris. Like, we need to hear more of the fine details about her policy. Do you? Like, it's not like, sure, I believe that presidential candidates should offer some detailed policy, right? I think that's important, and I'm one of the people that loves policy and loves to see this type of thing. But I question how much the average voter actually cares. If she releases a super detailed policy, which she's gone into some detail, not like super specific, but she's gone into some detail. Are you going to read that? Are you going to listen? Or are you just going to find that boring? Because she has talked at some of her campaign events about her policy. So I don't know if that argument holds up. Maybe it does, but in my mind, it probably doesn't. Now, as for the question of like the Liz Cheneys of the world, are you going to try to appeal to them versus the Rashida Tlaibs of the world, which is a debate that's been going on social media, because a lot on the far left have been saying, well, the Democratic Party is trying to appeal more to the conservative side of the aisle than the far left. I think that there's a couple interesting points here. First of all, Liz Cheney and Dick Cheney, yes, they have endorsed Kamala Harris. Maybe they'll carry some votes with them, maybe not, who knows. But they have endorsed them knowing as a guarantee that Kamala Harris strongly disagrees with them on policy. And knowing and expecting that if she wins, they're not going to have major influence on how she makes her policy. They're not. And I think conservatives in general who are considering voting for her know this. But yet they endorsed her. The far left, which, by the way, I think generally agrees with Harris on a lot, or Harris agrees with them a lot more than Harris agrees with the Liz Cheneys of the world, they haven't endorsed her. Rashida Tlaib has never endorsed a Democrat for president in her life. So why would we be appealing to those who haven't endorsed her, the side that has shown that they're unwilling to support her or a Democrat for president, rather than side that has at least shown openness to it? Any other comments on this issue?
No, I think you summed it up pretty well.
All right, moving on. Another interesting part of this campaign at the moment is the various campaigns' interview strategies. Because we've seen Harris get knocked a lot in the press, right, recently for not doing interviews. Of course, some of that is self-serving. They all want to interview Harris, it would make their viewership or their number of readers go up significantly, of course. And now this week we have seen a lot of interviews from Kamala Harris, or a lot that she's been booking. She's just this week, I believe, she went on the Call Her Daddy podcast with Alex Cooper, but she's going on the Howard Stern show. She's going on The View. She's going on the Late Show with Stephen Colbert. There might be another one. She went on 60 Minutes, and there might be another one or two in there. Tim Walz is going on Jimmy Kimmel Live. And then we see the Trump campaign. We've seen J.D. Vance do a lot of interviews on Fox News, but Donald Trump, right, he's backed out of the second potential debate. He backed out of a 60 Minutes interview because they wouldn't agree not to fact check him. So, Charlie, I'm curious what you make of these two campaigns' varying strategies when it comes to doing press.
Well, I think it's interesting that, yeah, certainly I think the move by Harris-Walz to really try to get their message out there is needed. They've had less time, obviously, if the Democrats had kept Joe Biden, which I think was a good move to replace him.
Sure.
But if they had kept him, he had a very well thought out plan, and you could see that because he'd been doing it the whole time.
Exactly.
So when you replace a candidate like that, who is a relatively different candidate to Biden,
yeah,
she needs to get her message out there, and I think she's done a decent job with that. If you just actually look at what she's been doing, the issue is, does the average person know that? And I don't think that. I don't think so.
And do they care enough to watch the interviews too?
No, I don't think they do. So the issue is, you're going out there and you're doing stuff, but people aren't seeing it. So what do you, as a campaign, need to do differently in order to get those people to understand what you're about? And as for the other side, as for the Trump side, I'm not surprised that Trump has not been doing too much media stuff. I think him using Vance as basically a speaker to talk through is relatively a good idea for him. I think Vance is certainly a politician who has experience. He knows what he's doing. And I think in terms of general just debate and conversation, he's better at laying out policy than Trump is, because Trump rambles quite a bit more. So I think the strategy from both parties could use some work, but I think the Trump-Vance campaign is doing what they need to be doing. And as for Harris-Walz, they need to find a way to connect better with their voter demographics.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's interesting because with Trump, I think like the bigger issue is just like he's still doing some stuff on Fox News, right? Newsmax, whatever. But he won't go on a network that is going to fact check him. And I think, like, honestly, we can and we should knock him for that, because there needs to be a president of the United States that's capable of telling the truth. But frankly, it's smart campaigning.
It really is smart campaigning.
Yeah. Now, on the Harris-Walz side, I think it is generally a good idea to start doing more press because, again, we believe that the American people would, in general, like to know more about the Harris-Walz ticket. I think it's complicated too, because what is the media going to ask? Like, we saw in her 60 Minutes interview that aired Monday night, them ask questions like, this was a question of Walz on 60 Minutes. How do you respond to Trump's criticism that Minnesota's out of step with the rest of the country? And I thought Walz actually had a good response to this question, but I think the bigger problem is it's not journalism to take Republican talking points and just make the Democrats respond to every single one of them. And I feel like we see this a lot in interviews with, like, for example, Dana Bash asked Harris, how do you respond to Trump's criticism or claim that you just turned black? Like, why are we asking candidates about just false things? Like, we don't need to bring that up. What's your thought on that, Charlie?
Well, so I disagree with you on the point that it's bad journalism. I think saying this is what the other side is saying about you, what are your thoughts on that? I don't think that is inherently a bad thing. I think that there are ways that can go wrong, and in some cases it has, but I will disagree with you on the point that it is poor journalism.
I'll agree with you with that, with the caveat that if you're asking them to respond to a lie about you, when you ask the question, you need to make clear to your viewing audience that it is a lie. Because
Yes, absolutely.
otherwise, you're essentially just repeating lies without telling anybody that they're lies, and at that point, you've just become misinformation.
Yes.
Now, as for other potential Harris interviews, I actually think she's recently been doing a smart strategy. Meet potential voters where they're at. Not everyone's going to be watching the news. Lots of people don't want to turn that on. They're not seeking that content. But her going on for example, the Call Her Daddy podcast with Alex Cooper, I think that's smart. I still maintain that we need to get Kamala Harris on Hot Ones. That absolutely has to happen.
That would be cool.
And then my other one, my other dream, I think the odds of it happening are like 0.0%, but get Tim Walz as the guest picker on College Game Day. That would be fun, I feel like. He knows football. Get him on that show, please.
Yeah, get him on. Here, let me look up Minnesota's football schedule.
I don't think they have an interesting home game coming up, but they did just beat They did just beat USC. We'll get to that. We'll get to that coming up in the sports section.
They have one home game left, and it's against Maryland.
Yeah, that's the only.
They host Penn State.
Yeah, but that's after the election.
Good point. Still have Walls on.
Yeah, I mean, it would be difficult to do, but it would be pretty fun, I think.
Yeah,
That's why I don't think it'll happen, though. Anywhere else that comes to mind where you think they should go for some more like fun interviews to kind of meet voters where they are?
Not necessarily, but I have a idea with states.
What?
They need to figure out Michigan, because if you're the Democrats, you really cannot lose Michigan.
You can't.
And it's looking like they might.
We'll see. We'll discuss this a lot more in depth. In the next few weeks, we're going to have a couple of specials out talking about the election, like solely focused on the election. And that's coming up in a couple weeks. So we'll talk about that, like the aspect of like electoral math a bit more there. But moving on to another issue around this election, Charlie, Elon Musk has appeared at a Trump rally in Pennsylvania.
He just picked a side.
Yes, he has picked a side. Not that he was doing a very good job of staying unbiased like he said he would. Which, fine. He has a right to endorse who he wants. He should maybe stop claiming that he's super unbiased in this election. But he has a right. Now, I will say, I believe, Charlie, that the United States should cancel their government contracts with SpaceX and other Elon Musk entities. Why? It has nothing to do with this. Nothing to do with him endorsing Trump. He can endorse who he wants. The reason behind it is that on Monday night, Elon Musk went on Tucker Carlson's show, and he pretty much promoted the idea that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, the sitting president and vice president of the United States, should be assassinated.
I'm sorry, what did he do?
He said they should be assassinated. What he said nobody is bothered to kill Kamala because it's pointless. Ha ha ha. What do you achieve? Nothing. You just
I saw that.
Nobody's trying to kill Biden. It would be pointless. So you're essentially promoting the assassination of the president and vice president of the United States, and you have government contracts. Why? Why does this guy have government contracts when he believes that the president and the vice president should be assassinated? That seems problematic to me.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah, this isn't the first time he's brought it up either. He brought it up after one of the Trump assassination attempts. Don't remember which one. But
I think it was the second one.
Yeah, it's dangerous rhetoric coming from a very influential person, and the fact that the government's still, in a way, promoting it is problematic.
Absolutely.
All right, Charlie. Anything else to add in our politics section?
Not particularly.
All right, then go for it. You are back at the helm of Charlie's Stat of the Week.
Yeah, which means we are back to having good, important statistics.
Hey.
Colin, stats are my job.
Okay.
They will be, and they will always be. So
I hope it's more important than Jimmy Carter's age, because our stat had to do with that last week.
Hey, so you're doing... Oh, come on, man. You're doing political stats now?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay. So the question is, now that we have the MLB playoffs going on, who has the longest Big Four sports drought in the United States?
Big
Playoffs.
Four playoff drought.
Yep.
It's still the Jets, right?
I think you're right.
Who did you have? You had the
No,
Jets?
no, well, technically it's a tie
Okay.
because the Jets last minute, because football season started, so technically this is season 13.
Yeah.
At the end of the day tomorrow, it'll be a tie between Buffalo and New York because the Sabres haven't made it since 2010 either.
Well, we'll get to our sports section in just a second, Charlie, but I don't think that either of those teams are breaking that drought this year.
The Jets might.
Have you seen Aaron Rodgers this week?
Yes, I also know they play in a pretty bad division.
Maybe. Again,
Colin, if the Broncos are the top wildcard seed in the AFC right now, anything's possible.
I did not realize that. Okay, let's get to sports. We'll get to the NFL in a minute, but let's start with the postseason. You just mentioned the MLB playoffs are underway, and so far we'll start with the wild card round, and then we'll get to what's happened in the divisional round so far in the LDS. But Charlie, so far it has been nothing short of incredible.
Yeah, no, it has been great. And you know what? Who is your favorite team to watch so far these playoffs? Not who you like the best, just who has been the most fun to watch.
That's actually tough because there's several teams to choose from.
I'm going with the Mets.
I think just because of the storylines, you got to go with the Tigers. In his two games, we'll start with just the wild card round. In his game in the wild card round, what?
No, sorry, go ahead.
No, Tariq Skubal was amazing in game one of the wild.
Oh yeah, that's what we're talking about.
Tariq Skubal is incredible. I mean, he won the Triple Crown this year. He's gonna win the Cy Young, possibly unanimously, maybe.
I mean, yeah, there's no one else. Really.
He should. If you get the pitching Triple Crown, I'm sorry, you should win that award unanimously.
I also think it's hilarious that he's the best pitcher in the American League, and then the next four guys are all on the same team. A team, by the way, that didn't make the playoff.
Yeah. You could argue the next five guys.
Yeah, you could argue the next five guys. I don't know if I'd go that far, but pretty close.
Sorry, the pain, man. The pain.
So
but the Tigers, though, Charlie, this is due for some celebration because the Astros will not be going to the ALCS for the first
time since 2016.
For some context, the Barack Obama was president the last time the Astros didn't make the ALCS,
which is absurd.
David Ortiz was still playing.
Yeah, that was the season he retired, no?
Yeah, it was his final year. That's absurd and absolutely cause for celebration. I think we can say it. The dynasty, which was never really a dynasty to begin with, is over.
No, yes, it was. Yes, it was.
One legitimate ring.
Okay, one legitimate ring.
They had a dynasty in the AL West. You could argue they even had an... In fact,
they had a dynasty in the American League.
Yes, they had a dynasty in the American League. That's fair. In MLB, no, they did not.
Which for most of baseball history would mean that you would be in the World Series basically automatically.
Yeah.
So no, they're a dynasty. I know you don't like them, but that shouldn't matter.
They have a dynasty in the AL. MLB not so much.
We'll leave it at that.
All right, Orioles, Charlie. 10 straight losses in the postseason for the Orioles. Now, that offense, which we know what that offense can do, that offense was straight up bad.
Yes, indeed it was.
And the Royals, by the way, Bobby Witt Jr.
I do not understand the Orioles. I do not understand the Orioles.
No, I do not. But Bobby Witt Jr. drove in the go-ahead run, I think, in both of those games of that series. That kid is a star.
Absolutely.
That kid is the future of baseball. Moving on to the NL wildcard round. Charlie, you mentioned the Mets. Mets Brewers. That game we finally did have a wildcard series that went the full 3 games, and that was some incredible baseball. Game 3. Sorry, you're gonna have to remind me what happened in Game 3 because the games are all blending together. That was incredible.
Mets came back from down 3. Pete Alonso hits a home run in the top of the ninth inning to win the series.
At the death.
Yep. Which is why I am calling them the Magic Mets. When they had Grimace, I was calling them the Mick Mets, and now I'm calling them the Magic Mets.
They're not the OMG Mets.
Nah.
All right.
Let's keep religion out of baseball.
All right. Padres. Against the Braves. What are the Braves doing?
I don't know. That team won the World Series and then just forgot how to play playoff baseball.
Exactly.
I am convinced of it because they make the playoffs and then they just forget how to play.
Hey Charlie, do you remember when Braves fans were complaining about how they hated having the extra week off from winning the division and getting the first round bye? It really took away their momentum.
And then the Phillies happened.
What happened to that? This
It
year they
stopped.
didn't have a week bye, and it
The
seems they
exact
still
same thing
couldn't
happened.
play in the playoffs. It's interesting,
Yes,
isn't it?
yes, indeed.
All right, now we get to the LCS round. All four series.
Every
for the
series
first
is
time
tied at
ever.
1.
Every series is tied at 1 for the first time ever. Which
it
one do you want to
becomes the
start
best
with?
of
There's
three.
no wrong answer here.
Let's start with a very weird series. The only series to have 2 shutouts. And that would be Cleveland and Detroit. Good old AL Central matchup. And 2 teams that are basically direct opposites of each other. The Guardians were great all year. They wrapped up the playoffs with I don't know how many games left and just rolled into the playoffs. Meanwhile, the Tigers had a 0.2% chance at the end of August, came out of absolutely nowhere, have all the momentum in the world, and I could very easily just see them rolling all the way to the World Series from here.
Yeah, exactly. The Guardians, I frankly thought the series might be over like 5 minutes in because the Guardians went up 5-0 before an out was recorded in game 1, and rolled from there. But then game 2 was incredible, both because Tariq Skubal, another gem of an outing, with a pitcher's duel, and then top of the 9th, Kerry Carpenter, 3-run homer off of Emmanuel Clase, the first home run Clase has given up to a lefty in almost 500 days, Charlie.
Wow.
I mean,
wow.
Could you have predicted that?
No.
No. And then, let's see. Keep it in the AL. Yankees, Royals. It's been a couple of fun games, too. That game 1 was really back and forth the entire way.
The Royals are just a fun team.
Yeah, they are. They really are. The Yankees are not a fun team.
No, the Yankees are the Yankees.
Yeah, where is Aaron Judge gone? I'm sure he'll wake up at some point now that I've said that, but he has zero career interesting postseason moments.
You see, the terrifying thing about Judge though is that he's there.
Yeah, no, he can hit a homer at any time.
At any moment, he can ruin your entire season with one swing.
Exactly. And
all right, speaking of
Soto in the lineup too.
Yeah, speaking of powerhouses taking on teams that were, I don't know, kind of weird. LA and San Diego. These 2 are at it again.
So I don't think I realized just how much they hated each other until watching Sunday night's game. I knew they hated each other.
Despise each other.
Yeah, and if the Padres win this series, it's going to be a whole new level of hatred between these 2 teams. I think game 1, Padres jumped out.
Ohtani is going to become the baseball Patrick Ewing.
Yeah, no, Ohtani jumped out. Sorry, Padres jumped out to a big lead in game 1, and then Ohtani tied it up with his first career postseason homer in his first career postseason game. Charlie, we all needed this guy to be playing in October. I don't care that it's with the Dodgers. We needed to see this guy in the postseason, and now we have it.
Yeah, now what we need to do is figure out how to get Mike back there too.
Yeah.
Which, please do not put him on the Dodgers.
Yeah.
They don't need more All-Stars.
But then game 2, Charlie. Game 2 is when all hell broke loose. Dodgers fans, real classy, throwing stuff at Padres players. Padres won in a landslide 10-2, but I mean, just classless. And Fernando Tatis Jr., his response, he was taunting the Dodgers fans the entire time. And the thing about him is he's the guy that can do that, and then he can go back that up by hitting a pair of homers in that game. Yes. This is a superstar.
He is amazing.
Whatever you think about him as a guy, I mean, he has his issues, right? But he is a superstar.
Yes, he is.
And he's going to be taunting the Dodgers for a long, long time. Although you wonder if he's awoken something inside that team. But San Diego's going to be rocking Tuesday, Wednesday.
And really, I mean, if San Diego wins Game 3, is the series over?
Maybe.
Because do you think the Dodgers, with all the expectations in the world, can come into a Game 4 and pull out a win in San Diego?
I'd honestly be more worried about them in a Game 5 than a Game 4.
Yeah. Ohtani high leverage.
Yeah. I mean that would be fun, but
High leverage is not his friend.
no. That's fair. And then the Mets Phillies, we have been treated so far to one of the best postseason series of all time.
Yeah, I mean, this Mets playoff run has been absolutely absurd.
I mean, so if I thought like the Mets are in a great place if they can get a split at Citizens Bank Park in Philly. And they did, but it
should have been 2-0.
It feels wrong because like they went from such an incredible high of Game 1, which was a great game, right? And then to an incredible low of Game 2 that it doesn't feel like they have the momentum, even though they technically did their job. They did what they needed to do in Philly.
Well, I think the fact that the Mets are up 4-3, and then you have the Phillies take the lead. Mets
Off
get it.
Diaz, too.
Yeah, then the Mets get it back.
Well, and let's remember too, the Mets were up 3-0. Did they get the lead back though? I don't think they got the lead back. Yeah, they tied it. Yeah.
Can the Mets just play one normal baseball game, please?
Yeah, and also, like, you want to talk about a series where superstars have come out? I mean, Bryce Harper, Nick Castellanos, yeah, Lindor, exactly. Alonso, exactly. Like this postseason, we are on pace for an all-time postseason.
Yep.
The only thing I ask,
Seattle were there.
Yeah, the only thing I ask is that the World Series goes 7 games.
Yes, and also could it please just not be Dodgers Yankees, please?
Yeah, I mean it's funny, right? Because it kind of has everything you want in a postseason so far, right? It's got the heavy hitters, right? But
it also has
contenders.
Yeah,
but it also has the Cinderellas.
some weird teams that barely got in there.
Yeah,
exactly.
So it would kind of feel like a disappointment then if it just ended up with the perennial contenders facing off.
The divisional series has 3 divisional matchups.
I don't think that's ever happened before.
No, and if the Orioles had won, we would have gotten all 4.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, wow. And who could have predicted that the Central would have 3 teams in the
3 teams and still have a record below 500. Thanks, Chicago.
All right, that's enough baseball for today. Let's talk about football, and we generally start with the NFL when talking about football. But today, there was a brand of football that was just better this week. Charlie, I thought that
Is that football of the Southeastern variety?
Well, a whole bunch. I guess they kind of missed the memo that this was supposed to be the boring week of college football.
There ain't no boring weeks in college football.
Leading into the interesting weeks. And right, I mean, Friday night we got a good matchup. We got Syracuse and UNLV, right? This was a
goes to overtime.
Game. Went to overtime. Syracuse ends up winning, deprives UNLV of their 3rd power conference win. Which is, so I mean, it sucks for them, but it was a great game. And we thought game of the week, question mark, on a Friday night.
Oh boy, were we wrong.
Then if you watched the early window on Saturday, you could be like, okay, yeah, that was probably it, right? We had like games like Penn State UCLA. That was not a very good football game. Missouri A&M. Missouri looked like trash. They went down to A&M. They were ranked 9 in the country, obviously undeserving of that. A mega loss to number 25 Texas A&M. A whole bunch of just other games that weren't very good, although we did see Army and Navy both go to 5-0, which is pretty cool. So we were thinking,
and they could both make the playoffs.
Yeah, so we were thinking, okay, yeah, maybe it's just not going to be a great week of football, right? We can turn our attention to the incredible schedule next week. And then the rest of the day happened.
Yeah.
We could start, Charlie, with practically any game that you want except Ohio State, Iowa, because that was a terrible game and we don't need to talk about it, or Georgia, Auburn.
Should we just go through the rankings and just see what happened? Let's start with Georgia Vandy.
Georgia Vandy?
Sorry, Alabama Vandy. Does Georgia play Vandy this year?
I don't think so.
Okay, because I was going to say, if they manage to get both of them, that would be amazing.
They do not play Vandy this year. They have a tough schedule. They still have to play Texas, Ole Miss, and Tennessee, but Vandy's not on their schedule.
Unfortunate. All right, things happened.
That's a way of putting it. Charlie, during the entire Nick Saban era at Alabama, they gave up a 13 combined points to Vanderbilt. Kalen DeBoer gave up 40 in one game. 40 in one game. Now, look, Nick Saban had an embarrassing loss in his first year at Alabama. They lost to ULM, but
they lost to Louisiana Monroe.
Yeah, but this is the most embarrassing loss for that program since then. They took all of the incredible highs of their win against Georgia, which was incredible. And I thought, they might come out here. They had this emotional win. They might not play great, but at the end of the day, they're playing frickin' Vanderbilt. They're going to get a win, and it's not going to be too hard.
And Colin, here's a question for you. Then actually, I was considering this for the stat of the week. When was the last time that Vandy beat Alabama?
Was it like 84 or something?
It was 84.
Yeah. And then what Vandy did, I mean, this was incredible. Like, I started paying attention to this game when it was 13-0, and I'm just like, well, this could be fun, but I mean, it's Alabama, they'll be fine. Kalen DeBoer is very good at finding ways to win football games. That's not quite what happened.
No.
The quarterback for Vanderbilt, Diego Pavia, had an incredible game. But then, Charlie, I think honestly the most fun part of this game is Vanderbilt fans obviously storming the field, but then taking down the goalposts, marching them 3.5 miles northeast and dumping them in the Cumberland River, walking them down Broadway in Nashville.
I mean, how about that? And Vandy, savor this one for a while because it's the last one you're going to get.
I mean, seriously though, this is Vanderbilt's first ever win versus a top 5 opponent. And given that they're in the Southeastern Conference, they've played plenty of them.
And every time they just get obliterated.
Yeah. This was a huge win. The upsets weren't done. USC goes down to Minnesota, 24-17. It's a bad loss for USC. They just didn't look good.
Yes, but it was not the biggest loss in the Big Ten.
No. Well, I mean, sure, you say that. Michigan goes down to unranked Washington. Washington avenges their national championship from last year, I guess. Frankly, Washington should just get the title given that, the cheating scandal. But Washington has not lost. Actually, here's a fun stat for you, Charlie. When was the last time Washington lost at the greatest setting?
I don't know. When was it?
2021 Apple Cup.
Wow.
It's been a while. It's been a long while.
No one. Okay, I will say it. Even though we do lose sometimes, because everyone does, Seattle teams are some of the best at defending their home turf.
They are. They really are.
Historically, the Seahawks
against the Giants this week.
Yeah, we'll talk about that one.
Yeah. Let's just say a couple other interesting games. SMU looks really good out of the gate. They beat ranked Louisville on the road. Boise State looks amazing. Ashton Jeanty, truly a Heisman candidate. And Boise State, if they win out, they're not just in the playoff. They probably get a bye because if you look at the rest of their schedule, it would probably be UNLV twice more. They've already beaten Wazoo. They'll play. There's good games on their schedule. Oregon State. So that's a fun team. Indiana.
That's a big win for the Pac-12 there, isn't it?
Yes, Indiana. 6-0 now. Could you have seen that one coming, Charlie? First bowl eligible team this year.
No, I did not see that coming.
There's a real possibility that they host Michigan on November 9th at 9-0.
It very well is. And do they also not play Washington as well?
They play Washington in 2 weeks. No, or 3 weeks.
Jeez,
They have a bye.
Washington's schedule hard.
Yeah, it is. It really is. Although it's slightly easier now with USC collapsing.
Doing what USC does.
Two more games to mention quickly here before we move to the NFL. Another unranked team taking down a ranked opponent. Arkansas takes down Tennessee
So a horrible week for the top 10.
Yes, but then the other game we have to mention in Berkeley. First of all, we all saw College Game Day on Saturday morning.
Yeah.
The scene there was electric.
It's the Calgorithm.
I still have the Jaden Knott song in my head.
How do you?
Yes, I do. And then so it went from such a high though to such a low. California blows a 25-point lead to lose to Miami by 1 point, 39-38. But here's the thing. There were, in my opinion, two factors that led to this collapse. Number one, and the biggest one, was the officiating. But number two, and the one I'll start with because it's easier to explain, is how they coached the end of the game. They did not play in the fourth quarter to go out and win. They played to try to just run time off the clock when there was too much time left, and it didn't work. If they had scored one more time, they would have won this game. Any type of score. If they had just gotten into field goal range, they would have won this game, Charlie. But,
that sounds familiar.
Yeah, well, sure. But they couldn't do that because they didn't try to do that. They thought they had the game in the bag when they didn't. But then we have to talk about the other thing. It's now 2 straight weeks that Miami has been straight up bailed out by the officials, or specifically by the ACC Replay Center. We saw it with the overturning of that Virginia Tech Hail Mary catch, which could have gone either way, but there was nothing conclusive one way or the other. And then we saw it with the no call on the targeting. Charlie, if that's not targeting, what is targeting?
Just scrap the rule at that point.
I mean, you can't claim to care about player safety and not call that targeting, not have any sort of penalty for that. He lowered the ground of his helmet, he hit him helmet to helmet, and he went down hurt too. Like, it was obvious. Like, that's the entire point of the rule. Like, I'm not saying the penalty should be decided based on whether he gets injured or not, but like, that's a telltale sign that like it's a problem, and like we're just not going to do anything about that. It's one of the most obvious targeting calls I've ever seen. It was, and they like you have to call that, and that would have won Cal the game. And then on the Miami drive, on their touchdown pass, 2 offensive linemen blocking in the end zone before the ball is thrown. Where's the illegal man downfield penalty?
That sounds like something's downfield that isn't supposed to be.
Yeah. Where's the call? I mean, Cal got absolutely robbed, and what started as just a joyous day in Berkeley, for it to end like this is actually pretty infuriating.
The Calgorithm fails again.
I wanted to see the woke mob storm the field.
No, we got the Coke mob instead.
All right.
See, I'm gonna love to see this rivalry over the next few years.
Do they play each other next year? I don't know if the ACC has announced opponents for next year yet.
They better.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be a yearly thing. I think Cal has just 2 permanent conference opponents, Stanford and SMU, just because of travel. Well, Stanford because of the historical rivalry, SMU to limit travel.
Is this why Washington plays Oregon every year?
No, that's because of the rivalry.
Well, yeah, no, that's what I mean. The rivalry game.
Yeah.
Good, because I want to see. I want to keep beating them.
Good luck.
It ain't happening this year, but
Dan Lanning's a better coach than Jed Fish.
Well, yeah, that should be fairly obvious.
Well, I don't agree because I don't particularly think Dan Lanning's a very good coach.
No, but Fish has been pretty bad.
Awful. He's been terrible.
We need to move on.
Yeah, we do. Let's talk NFL, Charlie. Where do you want to start? We can start anywhere.
Let's start with the Seahawks, whose defense stopped working again.
Yeah. They'll be fine, I think. Injuries are an issue, but they'll be fine. But it was bad.
Can we please call penalties when it's a penalty?
It's a penalty.
Refs,
Yeah,
what are
would
you
be nice.
doing?
That would be nice.
Let's go to Thursday night.
Yeah.
Kirk Cousins is unstoppable.
The Falcons are winning that division.
Kirk Cousins threw for 509 yards.
On the night they were honoring Matt Ryan, he broke Matt Ryan's team single-game passing record.
And, by the way, real quick, great night from Baker Mayfield.
Yes. No, Baker's doing a great job down there. I do think, though, with...
Wait, so hang on. You're telling me that the two best quarterbacks in the NFC are Kirk Cousins and Sam Darnold?
I mean, Geno Smith's right up there.
Colin,
Sure.
I think you remember when I said I wanted a little bit of chaos this year?
Yeah, we're getting it.
I think we took it too far.
Yeah. I mean, and it's amazing how the narrative around Kirk Cousins has shifted, though, because it used to be he cannot win a primetime game.
Yeah, and now it's like he's one of the best primetime guys ever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember let's talk about when he was like 0-8 in primetime.
Yeah. You mentioned Sam Darnold.
Known as this disastrously bad player. The Vikings haven't lost yet.
No. What's more interesting? The Jets. Aaron Rodgers threw 3 interceptions. That's not good.
Yeah. The Jets have looked bad.
The Jets have looked pretty darn bad. And I can't say I'm surprised. What else?
Their game this week was ugly.
Yeah.
Their game against Denver was one of the best games I've ever watched because it lived up to every single possible expectation I've had for Broncos Jets in a downpour.
You said you weren't here last week, but I said that if you watch that game, you might be entitled to financial compensation.
You should be.
Yeah. This week's financial compensation game of the week was Dolphins Patriots. This was comedy.
I don't think that helps very much.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna say, I mean, like, at least give them like a funny, stupid game from this week, like the 49ers blowing another big divisional lead.
Well, sure.
Or the Bengals forgetting how to kick field goals in overtime.
Yeah.
Or Josh Allen getting deleted by another AFC quarterback again.
Yeah, no, I gotta say, the Texans really impressed me. What was Sean McDermott doing at the end of the game there?
Figuring out. Okay, here's an issue. The Bills are losing games again. Is he gonna pull out his should I say motivation from last year?
That's a good question.
Because
I genuinely think he should be canned. I really do.
You know who else should be canned?
Who?
Doug Peterson. What are you doing? Like, yes, you won. Good job.
You beat Joe Flacco.
Now, here's something. Can you go into Chicago and beat the Bears?
Yeah.
I don't think you can.
Well, by the way, speaking of Joe Flacco and the Bears, a bit of a... Oh, sorry, no, the Bears played the Panthers this week. I'm just trying to find the Browns game. It was the Commanders and the Browns. Why is Joe Flacco... why did the Browns not re-sign him? Because now they're stuck with Deshaun Watson, who is apparently very, very bad at this whole football thing.
Yeah, apparently. But you know who isn't bad at football?
Jaden Daniels. Real quick, I think at this point, if you have the number 1 overall pick, take the guy that you think is going to go second overall. Because I think it's a good idea. Jacksonville, take notes. Do you think Jacksonville should have taken Zach Wilson then?
No, what I'm saying is for this year's draft, and for the love of God, do not draft, and for the love of God, do not draft Shedeur Sanders.
Somebody's going to be stuck with him, but no, who's...
Yeah, and looking at the draft order, it's probably going to be someone like the Raiders.
Who's going to be number 1 this year? Is it Milroe? It can't be, right?
No, I think it's the who's the Miami guy?
Okay, it's Cam Ward. Yeah, sure. Real quick, going back to college football.
Cam Ward.
Yeah, real quick, going back to college football. Ryan Williams is insane.
Oh yeah.
And so is Jeremiah Smith, by the way. Those two receivers, unbelievable. Particularly, I've just watched more Alabama than Ohio State because they've actually been playing quality opponents, and Ohio State hasn't been.
Yeah. By the way, I'm also just realizing that the 2 Super Bowl teams from 3 years ago are both tied for the worst team in the league.
The Bengals and the Rams.
Yes, I'm also realizing Bengals, you're 0-3 at home.
Yeah, I mean, look, they probably should have won that game against the Ravens, but they didn't, and that's what matters. I mean, McPherson missed the field goal. It was a pretty bad hold.
In your games, you've lost to the Patriots, the Commanders, who are actually decent, but at the time we didn't know that, and the Ravens in a game you really should have won.
Can we talk about that one Lamar play though?
Yeah, let's talk about the Lamar. Lamar is such a fun player to watch.
Yeah,
he just is.
It's must see TV
because he's just unfair.
He is. He really is.
So let's look forward to next week.
Yeah. Real quick. Cowboys do end up beating the Steelers. That was a fairly
in a game that was reminiscent of the 70s because no one knew what they were doing, and the game ended on a ridiculous lateral play that really didn't work and a very blatant foul that should have probably been a suspension.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, next week.
If you don't know what I'm talking about, look up the final play from that game.
Yeah, next week, 49ers Seahawks on Thursday night. That could be fun, or the 49ers might destroy them. We'll see. Lions Cowboys, that's a fun game. Bills Jets could be interesting on Monday Night Football.
And also,
Steelers Raiders rivalry is interesting.
Yeah, Chargers Broncos too. And the Falcons Panthers is always just going to be weird.
Yeah, no, that's gonna be a weird game. All right, we have to move on. We're running out of time. WNBA playoff.
Where did we last leave off with these?
I think we left off after the first round. The Aces are gone. They're done.
That New York team is unbelievable.
No, they're stacked. I mean, the Aces. It just didn't work out for them this year. They were never really able to put it together in the way that they were the last couple of years. Like they were still a good team,
the duel between Connecticut and Minnesota continues.
Yeah, it's not over yet.
Winner take all game 5. Winner heads to New York to face
those are a pair of fun teams too.
Those are a pair of really fun teams.
Yeah, all right. Charlie, no, but you probably want to mention, which is something interesting happened on the racetrack.
Formula One is on their break again, which means it's NASCAR time. The round of 12 in the playoffs continues. The Yellowwood 500 at Talladega. What a race this was. Coming to the end of stage 2, a big wreck between Ryan Blaney and Ross Chastain. Chastain got smoke coming out of his car for a while. He was okay, but big there for Blaney in needing points for the playoffs. Yes, for some reason they decided to put playoffs in a motor racing series. I'm not going to explain it now because it would take me too long, but yeah, they decided to do that. And then Talladega is famous for their huge wrecks. The big one always comes, and with 6 to go, we're barely holding on, and it's looking like Austin Cindric is going to go from dead last in playoff points to first and sneak his way into the round of 8 with a win. But as the field passes a lapped car of Todd Gilliland, the field bunches up a little bit. Logano gives a bit too much to Keselowski. Keselowski goes into the back of Cindric, sends him around, and collects 28 of the 37 cars running.
Jeez.
Left out most of the field, taking out Hemrick, McDowell, Barry, Priest, Burton, Logano, Cindric, and damaging Briscoe, Nemchek, Elliott. Briscoe's in the playoffs. So was Elliott. So was Suarez, who was involved. This is huge for the playoffs. Speaking of the playoffs, Larson and Byron starting 3rd and 4th on the restart, dueling for the win. But the win would go to Ricky Stenhouse Jr. and the 47 team for J.W. Doherty Racing, Brad Keselowski following in 2nd. And that means that it's elimination time. Come next weekend at the road course in Charlotte.
All right. Quickly before we go, Charlie, interesting hire from the Cleveland Guardians. Oh, sorry, not from the Cincinnati Reds, hiring former Cleveland Guardians Terry Francona. Charlie, this is a great choice.
I love this hire. This is a great hire for a Reds team that really, I don't want to say they're directionless, but they need something to start going, because that you cannot waste Ellie De La Cruz like that.
No, I also feel like it's a sign that they plan to invest in their team, right?
Yes, I only wish that our team would do that.
No kidding. I mean, sure, Dan Wilson is great, but if you had waited to hire till the offseason, maybe you could have had Terry Francona.
Yeah, you could have. Oh, and speaking of spending money, hey guys, there's a really great shiny first baseman in New York. Maybe pick him up.
Yeah, maybe. All right. It's going to do it for this episode of C&C Talks. Make sure to subscribe. Episodes every single week wherever you podcasts. Our website, cctalks.com, has everything you need to know about the show. You can call us with your questions, 360-389-2630. Again, that's 360-389-2630. You can follow us on Twitter at CC Talks Podcast. You can follow Charlie at CC Talks Charlie, and you can join our Discord at cctalks.com/discord. All of this information and more is in the description below. For now, for producer Morris, production designer Zach, I'm Colin.
Charlie, and we'll see you next week.